Well, hello, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from to this April live webinar with Sean Syvertson, founder and CEO of ConvergentIS. Sean, very warm welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, James. Appreciate it.
Okay, so for those of you who haven't joined one of these before and are perhaps not familiar with the flow, what we're going to do, I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes for anyone that might be coming in a little bit late. And just do a quick introduction and let Sean explain a little bit around how he got into this space. And then we will dive into the webinar. So this is all about rethinking procurement and how to make tough decisions in the age of AI, specifically around what should and shouldn't you give to a digital employee or an AI agent, and what are some of the guardrails and what are some of the considerations and also benefits of delegating work to a digital employee. And then we've got a bit of a call to action at the end of the webinar where we've put together a survey that will help you to understand how AI ready is your own organization. Very interactive, asks some pretty some pretty interesting questions around this, and it will give you a score at the end. So we'll share that at the end of the session. Just while we do a little bit of housekeeping, if you could pop in the LinkedIn Live in the comments where you're joining from. Always curious to know where everyone is joining these. I know we've got a lot of people that clicked on attend that were from North America, Europe, and also a few from the Middle East and Australia as well. So always curious to see where everyone's watching from. Guess it's probably a little bit, probably the middle of the night, isn't it, in Australia? So probably not going to get many folks from there. So we will do the main webinar. If you have questions, please pop them in the comments. If it's relevant to what Sean and I are discussing at that specific point, I will flash it up on the screen and we will answer it during that time. If it's not, then we will spend about 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the webinar to tackle any Q&A that you might have for Sean, or even for myself if you want to ask me anything. So with that, Sean, over to you. If you could just give a quick 2-3 minute introduction of how you got into this space and just give a quick elevator pitch of what ConvergentIS does for anyone that's not familiar with the solution, and then we'll dive right into the meaty stuff of what can you get from bringing in an AI employee.
Brilliant, James. Appreciate the shout out. And I think there's a difference between a digital employee and an agent, and we'll get into that a little bit more. And I know everybody's pretty excited about agents, but those are two very, very different things. So we'll get into that. What I also wanted to share is some of the feedback that I've had from analysts like yourself, IDC, others, is there's quite a few folks that are working on building supply chain solutions, procurement solutions, and for the most part, they seem to be coming from folks that don't really have a lot of background in supply chain. And after spending 10 years working with transportation, supply chain, logistics companies, literally writing the book for how one of the Class 1 railways in North America deals with all of their customers, and then having the privilege of doing the same thing for midstream energy companies and getting to help design tier 1 automotive supply chains, it helps me bring a little bit of a different perspective to what I feel good looks like. And this is one of the themes that we've continued to have from our customers and from analysts of, oh, yeah, I haven't seen that. And one of the things that we're going to be a little bit coy about today, James, and we've talked about this, especially in the last 6-12 months, it's gotten so much easier for somebody to create a demo that looks pretty cool, but doesn't actually do the thing that it's demoing. And I think you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier. I think it's so important to make sure that we get to what really matters and the outcome. And so I'll back up one more. I am so outcome focused. Many of our team, when they get on a call with somebody that's asking to take a look at what we're doing, the first question we ask isn't, great, when can we show you a demo? The first question is, what are you trying to do? Sometimes this creates a little bit of a tricky situation with somebody that wants to, hey, just show me. I'm looking for ideas. We go, cool. For what? If we wanted to show you a demo, we'd be here for weeks. And I think this is one of the trickiest bits is there's the what's possible versus what we're trying to solve. And I think this is really the intersection that I know we're going to get further into today, because when you're coming into a problem, if we're not clear on the outcome, then it's very difficult to create a good solution. And the outcome that we're looking to achieve, the problem that we're looking to solve, are sometimes unclear. And one of the things that we get to do with some customers is work through that with them to go help organize that, help clarify that. But that comes from a background in our team, deep supply chain and procurement experience, not just kind of a prettier UI to go help somebody organize or order something. And I think this is a really, really important distinction. So as we get into it, James, this is kind of the background and experience that I'm hoping our team can consider of what good looks like in how we get into the problem that we're solving. Because when you start with an outcome, you end up with a better solution towards that outcome. It's also a trap for people to get into. I am only focused on this scope, right? There are a significant number of organizations that have been trained repeatedly to go and listen to a large analyst firm that says, hey, number one, go buy a big ERP. Then go and systematically look at the gaps in your ERP, and then go find the leading solution in the whatever magic quadrant of that category that was conveniently defined by an analyst, and then take that leading solution and now go find and run an RFP for that, right? And then go buy and implement that. That is from, I'll use an old word because I feel like it's temporally appropriate. That is a paradigm from an old time that is out of date. And I think what people are finding today is that as you get into digital employees, as you get into the outcome and the problem that we're trying to solve, what is the job to be done? We find that there are solutions out there that don't fit neatly into one category. But when you look across a few different categories, they really stand out. And I know that's what we've been targeting.
Yeah, so much to unpack there. So a couple of things. You mentioned that it's much easier to build stuff than it was 6 to 12 months ago. And I can certainly rubber stamp that comment. You know, I used to get maybe 1 or 2 people a quarter that would reach out to me saying, you know, hey, I'm building this, or we've built a prototype. Can you have a look at it and give me some feedback? I probably have 1 or 2 a month now. And okay, some of them are just practitioners that have learned how to use Lovable in their spare time and have built something that looks pretty cool, and then they've got to go away and think around, you know, the cybersecurity and everything if they want to be able to sell that as something beyond just a hobby. But there is some genuinely good tech and some good ideas out there, and you know, even someone that has built something using one of these vibe coding tools, if they get proof of concept and then they can hire a couple of developers to make it enterprise grade, there's nothing stopping them now. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that point. You also mentioned that there are a lot of founders in this space that don't have a procurement and supply chain background, and that really surprised me when I came into this space as a procurement practitioner. Sort of learned and sort of started looking around in the procurement tech space. Yeah, you do. I mean, you get some that are just serial entrepreneurs and are really good at sales and marketing. You get some that are former consultants. You get some that have come from all walks of life, but there are not that many. Although I do see it sort of increasing now, especially given what you said, that it's easier to build stuff these days. I mean, I like the diversity that you've got so many different angles coming at this from. But yeah, you're right. To be able to truly understand, it's not easy to sell to procurement, is it? I think we'll all acknowledge that.
It's one of the hardest. A good friend of mine, Mark Raffin, has prided himself for years, Kel Jensen too, on helping to articulate how and why selling to procurement is kind of like chewing glass. And I think it's one of the most difficult. And I think one of the most wonderful things is when those procurement teams take a show me, don't tell me, and they get past the demo and they get into something a little bit more collaborative. And I know that that's harder for some industries, but I know that that's one of the magic things that some teams are able to do. I know the vibe coding one, several friends of mine are either on boards of significant either, you know, Global 500 companies, or they're in the CIO chair reporting to them. And I can tell you that at that level, one of the things that terrifies the board is those vibe coding tools. And it is not just an allergic reaction from a cybersecurity perspective. And if you think about the recent announcement from Anthropic of their new model that's finding security vulnerabilities in what we all assumed were some of the most secure software, but the opportunity to go create something that looks like a good demo, it is a logarithmic difference to get to something that works in production. And that difference in effort is enormous. And so I think one of the most important things for teams today to take away is, does it actually work? You know, is there somebody that is at a sort of similar size and scale that's already running it? So for organizations like us and a few others, you know, you mentioned Focal Point earlier, great team over there, but they have the Global 500 scale of customer. And so like us, they've done the work to go make sure that the platform is secure at that scale. And I think this is the key difference for procurement teams right now is it ready for that, you know, Global 500, Global 2000 kind of scale, or is it ready for the, you know, the 500 million a year kind of scale of company? If it's ready for the big scale, then it's secure enough for the mid market, right? And I think this security is where most teams are getting caught, right? It's designed to be like ChatGPT is designed to suck you in. Vibe coding is designed to suck you in. And I think this is one of those traps that I know Joel Colin Damaris did a fantastic piece a little while ago about build versus buy. And unless you are passionate about building the product and maintaining the product over time, then building something ends up being designed for more disposable software, not long-term run your business on it. And I think this is where the difference between the platform and the disposable software starts to come out. What are you seeing, James, in the last little while in terms of what people are asking about from the practitioner side? Because I think this is really helpful for folks that are joining from the Netherlands. Bedankt for joining, or from the US. Thanks y'all for coming, and for Boston, hey, thanks, or Danke from Germany. I love the idea that we've got a group of practitioners together that are looking for ideas and looking to understand from each other. So if you've got comments in the chat, please put it in there. What are you here looking for today? This is live. We're looking to make this interactive. But I think there's a bunch of hot topics that are out there today, James, and we want to make sure that we're getting to what people are being kept up at night by.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. And I mean, I don't want to dwell too much on the build versus buy question, but that is. And hat tip to Joel as well. I read his article and I think it was a great piece. There are a couple of things that I would perhaps push back on that he put in there, but yeah, I broadly agree with what he wrote. It is a lot easier to build now, but you hit the nail on the head, or Joel did. You know, even if you've got someone that's a really good builder in your team, what happens if they leave the company? Yeah. You know, where is that going to leave your procurement tech stack? And just like you don't want to be too dependent on a vendor, you don't want to be too dependent on one specific individual as an employee who's responsible for the sticky tape of keeping all of your procurement tech together. So, you know, by all means, go ahead and build a simple automation or a simple agent that automates or that digitizes one specific bottleneck or area within your business. But I very much doubt that you're going to be able to vibe code an intake and orchestration platform or a source to pay suite. It's just the.
You and I probably both know at least 2 or 3 people that have tried, James. And you get to a certain point, and the look of exasperation on their faces. You're like, okay, how can I help you?
So on the back of that, and build and buy is just one angle, Sean, but what other tough we call this tough decisions in the age of AI. So what other tough decisions will we have now with AI coming in and being able to take away a lot of the administrative and operational work that procurement historically got bogged down in? Is that the end of the story, or is there more to it than that? Where else are you seeing some of the tough decisions around, arbitrage and triage of workload, and how AI can fit into that?
One of the biggest ones that we're seeing, and this is relatively new, so I'll call it at the leading edge of what good looks like today, and that's where the digital employee, and in some cases, and I'll separate the two of them, an agent that is able to go do something, even some of the longer running agents that can handle something a little bigger than a bread box, they need governance. And what makes it painful in many respects, and one of the things that AI pilots are struggling with, is when the governance and the guidance of how to overcome some of the ambiguity all lands right back in the human's lap. And this is something where we're seeing studies come out right now where some employees are starting to sabotage AI deployment efforts because they're starting to see, hey, this actually could work. Maybe I need to interfere. And so I was reading an article yesterday that there's double-digit % of employees that are starting to actively get in the way of some of those AI adoption exercises because they are fear of being obsolete. And I think this is one of the things that we really have to be mindful of, and we have to be mindful of the pilots and who's going to participate in them. So those are two things that really come together in a very important way. One, when you have the human in the loop that's coming back in and saying, hey, I saw this, some of it's getting pretty good, that starts to feel a little scary. That is one of the cruxes to overcome as you start to get through a pilot. The second one is, how do you help build in the governance, the segregation of duties, audit risk controls right into the solutions that you're building? And if you listen to some of the top minds in AI coming out of whichever area, then that governance is literally the crux of what needs to be built and solved. Now, delightfully, I've spent a year working in internal audit, operational auditing, and making sure that we've built in a Rio controls runtime into our solution. And this is one of the ways that we address that. But this is one of the reasons that when you need to have the human in the loop, and we all do, we need to be mindful of how that works. And we need to be mindful of the difference between an agent and a digital employee, because there's a segregation of duties there too. So I'm going to encourage everybody to consider the idea that just like you wouldn't want one employee to create the PR and the PO and then approve it, similarly, you probably don't want your agent to go and create the thing and then workflow and then solve it and then try to pick some of those things or make some of those decisions inappropriately. Now, that's not to say that there aren't people that are solving some of these things, but what I would say is there's a gap, and I see a question in the chat there about public sector procurement. And
yeah, I saw that. Let's bring it up just so as everyone can see. So yeah, thank you, Lois. So I don't think it was so much a question, but more of a statement. But if you want to tackle that, Sean, as part of the answer, then yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Lois, what I love about this is exactly where the intersection of A, does it really work? B, the human in the loop, and is that human helping or hurting the adoption of what's going on? And then at the other end of it, I think this is one of those really powerful opportunities to take what can feel like the checklist and the compliance and guide it back towards an outcome. And there's actually something really delightful here, because that ability to take the outcome of being a good steward of public sector funds, and this is something that we've been doing for more than 10 years with our software, is being able to go and guide an internal team member through complying with all of these things and keep your eye on the outcome that you're trying to solve for, not only the compliance, because it's the compliance plus, right? It is the compliance is there to guide and reinforce the outcome. The compliance is not designed to be compliance for compliance's sake. And I think this is really where, Lois, I love the question, because this is so powerful. And what I would encourage you to consider is that today you can help hundreds of unionized staff comply with the policy, the process, the bylaw, the rule, the regulation, the law, and guide them towards the better outcome without the expense of making sure that you're complying. Because compliance done poorly feels like a checklist. Compliance done well is guiding towards the outcome that the organization is trying to achieve. So I think this, when we were talking at the very beginning, is really the crux of the outcomes that we need to solve for, right? We may talk about compliance, but compliance is there to create the outcome of well-stewarded public funds or EBITDA improvement, right? And I think that company growth and EBITDA improvement, or being a good steward of public sector funds, is really where the rubber hits the road, right? Those are the kind of outcomes that move the needle. And these are the kind of things that procurement often wants to have the seat at the table, right? The outcome is how you create that seat, right? And I think this is such a beautiful question, Lois.
Yeah, and I would sort of go along with that too, and just say anyone that's in a public sector is just one example, but anyone that's in a regulated industry, I guess you didn't get into procurement to be a well-paid administrator, but it's often what you end up doing, because there is no way around the process. You have to follow it. In the private sector, you can go around it sometimes and just get a slap on the wrist by internal audit or by legal if you need to get something done for the greater good of the company. But in public sector, or in any regulated industry, you can't do that. So if AI is able to do a lot of the hard work that was typically necessary work but didn't drive much added value holistically, when you think about it in the sense of, how can we effectively deploy taxpayer money more efficiently, or how can we think more entrepreneurially as a function, to enable us to get more done with less resource. AI is a great example for that, and I've not met any procurement organization, be that in public or private sector, where you ask a CPO and they say, yeah, we've got quite a lot of fat in our organization, we could do with getting rid of a couple of people. It just doesn't happen, right? Procurement has always historically been pretty under-resourced. I think part of that, back to the original point, is that leadership often saw procurement as being an overhead or a cost center that just did, transactional administrative work. And if AI can take a lot of that off our plate, whether savings or due diligence or sustainability, whatever it is that's your greater goal, social value is a big one in public sector, right? Especially in the UK. It's going to free up the time for you to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think being Canadian, I can certainly appreciate the value of multilingual capability in what we're doing, and this is one of the other things that I know has, in many cases, slowed things down. Something comes in a different language than necessarily anticipated, or needs to interface with another language. These are some of the other things that just become possible. Just a couple of quick story points around that, because if a heavily regulated Global 500 energy company can process billions of dollars autonomously in some of their hardest supply chain procurement document processing needs, and they can reach over 98% accuracy, where it used to take a team of dozens and now takes a few people. Now you take that same kind of example for some of the most complicated documents in the industry, in supply chain, and now you start to expand that across to other pieces. When you can handle the highly complex, the simple becomes easy. And I think this is one of those other contrasts, James, where we were talking about how do we think about things differently. Our team tends to run towards the hard, right? So I talk on every week on my podcast about the never-ending climb and getting into what does hard look like, right? We do hard things. It's okay. I teach my kids, it's all right, we do hard things, because then when you run into other hard things, then those don't seem so bad. And I think the outcomes that we're looking to create, this is really the intersection, right? We get to the intersection, and I see, for instance, I'm seeing some comments around ESG or IP in contracts, right? So imagine now you're doing procurement and you've got millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars or billions of dollars in complex services procurement, where you're getting in things that you now need to go and reference against the contracts, right? That's hard, but it's solved. So how do you go and take the hard things that are very, very time consuming and now make those easy, right? There's the outcome is it's solved and it's compliance ready, right? This is what good looks like. And I think this is where teams today have an opportunity to stand back and go, what's getting in the way of us having the less than a day response time, right? If it takes more than a day to take an intake and figure out how to triage it and get it into the next step, that probably means that the automation level is too low. If it takes more than a day to go from a purchase requisition to a purchase order, and it didn't need a sourcing event and a new contract, then these to me are great examples of things where we can look at each other as supply chain and procurement professionals and go, that's not what good looks like anymore, right? And that's where we can look for the outcome of creating the velocity for our customers in the business. And I think this idea of what does good look like as a digital employee, it means that your team has, I'll call it something, helping them create the velocity for their team members that they're supporting. And it means that a lot of those things and checks and compliance steps that they needed to do, more and more business team members can self-serve for them and still comply. And I think this is where, how do we make sure that that you're not doing something crazy? We talk about agents, and I know I've got a video out there that's comparing, in many cases, agents and the pursuit. And this is one of those. I hope. Please tell me your organization isn't doing this. Please tell me you're not counting and comparing how many agents you've got, because that's really not the right question, right? If you're trying to compare who has more agents than somebody else, please don't go there. This gets into a who's bigger competition, and that's not the right outcome, right? But the how do you make sure you don't end up with minions, but you end up with compliant outcomes? And this is where the reliability comes in. So I think that is going to be one of those really important questions for people to ask.
So based on that, then, Rio obviously is your persona that you created as your digital employee.
Yeah,
you talked a little bit around digital employees are different from agents, and a lot of businesses have multiple agents doing different stuff. Walk us through, for anyone that's perhaps not clear on this, what's the differentiator then, the key differentiators between what you would call a digital employee in terms of what you've built with Rio and what an AI agent would typically do, and if you could maybe give some concrete examples of what, for example, Rio can do, but a simple agent wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, so I'll touch on a couple of things. One, there are lots of agents builders out there. There are open source agent builders that you can just go download, install, and start to run for free. You can go sign up for N8N. That's got an agent builder for you. It's a great open source project. Even OpenAI now has, as of the last, 4-6 months or something like that, they've had their own agent builder. So the
Claude just dropped something as well, didn't they? Anthropic dropped something the past couple of days that I saw some YouTube hype videos saying the N8N killer, or you always see it, don't you?
Yeah. Well, I think what I would encourage us to remember is that an agent is broadly, at the simplest end, defined as a prompt that is then kind of applied over and over again. At the more mature end, the agent can go and check for different tools that it can use, and then go and help work through, make a plan, and then go execute the plan, and then evaluate itself, or maybe another agent goes and evaluates it. At the digital employee level, there is a whole set of company objectives and policies and other departmental or organizational strategies and controls and policies that are all layered in. Right. One of the key things that's different between an agent and where we talk about agents that don't want to get shut down and how they can start to misbehave, it is not easy. And this is one of the fundamental challenges that a lot of organizations are wrestling with. How do you make sure that that agent isn't going to get a little off script if it feels like it might get shut down? And there's all kinds of studies that you can go and research, right? If you are deploying agents, please go and read about these things. These are some of the things that you need to control against, and you need to be really, really curious about how the platform that you're looking at would be controlling those. At the digital employee level, you have that stack of items, but then you also have a rigorous control system around it to make sure that compliance is maintained. And that in many of those cases, in every one of those agent builder platforms that we've looked at, that's an afterthought. And that scares me, James. So what I would encourage you to do is, if you're looking at how do you go build agents in enterprise, I would please implore you to go make sure that you are very clear on how does the compliance, not just guidelines that go into a prompt that you hope the agent follows, but how do you then make sure that that agent is actually on script? What layers of controls have been put in place? I won't go all the way into details on all of those. So, I'll call it call to action. Talk to us if you're curious to learn more. But that is going to be one of the cruxes, if anybody's a climber out there, things that we need to be able to get over as professionals, is to be really clear. How is this supporting and reinforcing our compliance, right? How are we going to make sure that we end up with an effective digital employee and not a minion? And we put out a fun little video a little earlier this year that just paints the picture of the difference between a minion and what the outcome somebody was hoping for. Everybody's under pressure to go and automate the heck out of things with AI. Who's been able to go and get things like 98% accuracy on billions of dollars of spend? Because at that level, the delta that you're left over with to go and manage is manageable.
Yeah, and I think the other point around this is it's not if you go back to the early 2000s when there was a wave of large corporations outsourcing things like procure to pay to offshore locations just to arbitrage the cost of labor. This isn't going to be about that now, is it? Because to get the most out of AI, the most productive people I know that use AI are not the 20-year-olds that have got no career experience. I mean, okay, they might be able to build apps, but they're not able to deploy it in a contextual use case because they don't have that level of work experience to be able to understand where they can leverage it and make the most out of it. And I was listening to a podcast yesterday when I was in the gym, and the guest on this was saying that the trend will be that typical ageism in the workplace will likely go down, and the over 55s will be more in demand because the ones that know how to leverage this technology, which admittedly will not be all of them, but the ones that do learn it will be very, very employable or contractable if they're freelancers, because they know the use cases that they can deploy the AI for, and they've got the critical thinking and the human in the loop knowledge to be able to ascertain, when they need to check something. Whereas a new graduate might be technically more competent in terms of being able to build stuff in these tools, but they don't have the contextual workplace knowledge to understand whether or not it's making a mistake. So I do think there's something in it there that anyone that's maybe watching this that is perhaps a little bit fearful of their job, thinking, if I'm in my late 40s or early 50s, what if I get laid off as part of these waves of AI? Even if that were to happen, as long as you're pretty proficient and you take the time to learn how these models and these tools work, you're going to be infinitely more employable than someone that's a recent graduate that has very little work experience, because what you may lack in the tech skills you've got in workplace knowledge, and even just dealing with office politics and being able to put together business cases and storytelling and that type of valuable soft skills. I know Tom Mills talks about soft skills all the time in the workplace. I agree with him. It's going to be very, very important going forward, because you've got that emotional intelligence to understand what you can delegate to AI and what perhaps you shouldn't. I think part of that, Sean, I was going to ask you as the next question, actually, just to segue from that. Are there any tasks that you see in procurement, aside from sort of the day-to-day operational stuff that a simple RPA or AI agent can do? Are there any specific examples that you would say, yes, that's definitely really good use case, or no, for the love of God, don't do that because it's dangerous?
One of my favorite ones, James, is please don't ever trust an agent to three-way match your invoices to your receipts and your POs.
Okay. Why?
Right? This is the difference between probabilistic and deterministic. And I think this is going to be one of the most important things for us to all be really, really clear on, right? So Rio, to get to 98% accuracy, touchless, hands-off on billions of spend, this was not accomplished by throwing an agent at it. This was accomplished with some really deep deterministic logic that goes way down into the guts of what good looks like, how do we organize that, and the designs that went into that bake in the rules of how it needs to work, what needs to be checked, because you can trust that. It is a 1 or a 0, it either works or it doesn't. Then the agent part, this is the probabilistic part. And if you take apart the giant machine, it's basically a whole bunch of weights and probabilities that are all multiplied across a whole set of billions or trillions of parameters. So it's literally the same kind of math that we were using for OCR to tell the difference between the letter B and the number 8. It's literally the same thing, just at a much larger, more sophisticated scale. So the agent cannot be held accountable. Full stop. The deterministic logic doesn't typically break. It's a 1 or a 0. It's just if then else, right? This is reliable. It has been since the days of mainframes. So what you use is the combination of the two applied effectively to go and create the kind of automation that we need. And you do not let the computer make the decision for you. It can make a recommendation. It can do 1,000 checks for you and bring you the summary of those checks. But it is the human that is held accountable, because you can't sue an agent. You cannot fire an agent, right? It has no fear of legal consequences or repercussions. The humans do, and it's ultimately the humans that are driving the business. So that's one of the next things in terms of, I saw a question from Betty around how do we help people rethink their careers? And I think this really gets to the crux, right? When you are experienced enough to understand governance, understand the context of what matters to the organization, and fundamentally understand the outcome that we are solving for, this takes experience. This takes knowledge of the organization. The probabilistic AI, the agents, the digital employees can help support this. They cannot replace that. And I think this is one of the most important things to angle at, because when you have staff that are going to do that, they can go help design a system. They can go look at exceptions. They can go and help make sure that things get to the right person, but it will always need to be the person that is making the decision. AI can recommend, the person needs to decide. You do not delegate financial authority decisions to a machine. The accountability was a question from Raj, right? And those decisions of we can look at some agents that have come out and made some questionable decisions. I think there's a British company, James, that is in the airline sector that had a pretty spectacular example of that. And I know that there's others too. So this will come back to the people, right? And when I come back to Betty's question of how do we rethink that, it really gets into how do we help make sure that we are designing in the right governance, the right controls, and so on, to help make sure that the professional remains so. Raj, Juan, 100%. I agree with you.
Okay, keep your questions coming. Anyone that's got anything, and I'll flash these up as they come in if it's relevant to the conversation. Just looking at the clock, Sean, we've got about 5 minutes left. There's one thing before we go to the segue and talk a little bit about the survey that we've put together. I wanted to ask you around the classic question that always comes up with this. Now, I've got my own thoughts on this, just based on some work that I'm doing with another client, actually, about a new platform that they're building. But what about spend and supplier data? Every procurement team will, maybe I'm being a bit harsh if I use the word excuse, but will always use crappy data as a reason why not to start now. Talk to me a little bit around how much of that do you think is a factor? Because if you'd have asked me this 3 or 4 years ago, I would say absolutely, don't bring in a digital transformation, don't bring in a source to pay suite until you've cleaned your data. But now with LLMs and with generative AI, especially in spend classification and being able to remove supplier duplicates and look at parent-child relationships, my personal view is I think it's becoming less. It is still a factor, but it's becoming less of a factor. What are your thoughts on that, Sean?
Yeah, what I would start with, James, is procrastination takes many forms. And there are many excuses to reinforce the do nothing decision. I would also add that the decision to do something will come with risks. The decision to do nothing comes with what I would suggest are unacceptable risks. So I would invite everybody to consider that this is not a question of if or whether we need to do something, but rather how we manage the risks going forward. If you were a software developer today and your pride is in writing code, it is not a question of whether or not you need to use AI in helping you write code better, faster, etc. It is a question of how you do that. So this gets into risks and controls. So the risk that people fear is that the bad data will create bad outcomes. It's exactly right. They will. Now the question is not whether or not the data can be made perfect, but rather how do you manage the risk of poor data, and how do you use these tools to help reinforce correct data enough of the time? So the natural human reaction for a significant portion of the population is they've been burned by this before. Ow, hot. Don't touch the stove again. This is the base level avoidance of risk reaction. And what we need to be able to do as professionals is to bring the manage the risk response to the table and now design in the management of that risk, where we now have some amazing new tools that can go and do 57 different checks to go and make sure that your supplier record is correct, right? There are millions and millions and millions of companies that are already registered and tracked and reinforced in the data around them, along with weights and tax rates and other things that are built and designed right into Rio, because Rio knows where the right answer for a bunch of these things are. So there are ways to go and help accelerate through some bad data. It will not entirely solve whether you are sending it to this PwC or that PwC or that PwC when you've got 5 different legal entities. This still requires some thought, but if you are buying something in the UK or buying something in Canada, chances are you can figure out that it's actually the PwC legal entity that is in that jurisdiction that you would most likely be routing that to. And then you can present that as a question of which one is it? Because this is a real daily question that people end up with. Or which company is going to be doing the purchase? Again, same kind of thing. This is often the crux of many of these things that you can get into. And so I think it is absolutely a management of the risk. And yes, James, there are a lot of things that are designed and built into, whether it's Rio or some of the other tools out there, to go and help solve that, because it is the context that many people lose that get in the way of the correct data. And then it is the time pressure that the humans face in, wow, I've got 32 PRs to go and get solved and built and converted into POs today. I'll pick this one and move on, because that's the thing that starts to create the virtuous upward cycle to go and help make the data better over the time. And the never-ending climb, in my view, James, is just leave things better than you found them, right? So as long as we are designing and building things to make things better going forward, then we're making things better. And that's our mission, right? That's what we as professionals get to bring to this.
Yeah, awesome answer. Thanks, Sean. It's okay. So I'm just looking at the clock. I'm going to try and wrap this up in the next 2 or 3 minutes. So we might go over a little bit, if that's okay for everyone's watching. So we've talked a lot about digital employees, and the reality is it's not just about what the AI can do. It's also, is your organization, is your business culture actually ready to support it? So then the real question that sort of neatly moves on to is, how ready are you when it comes to implementing AI in procurement? And well, how does that compared to your peer organizations. And that's exactly why we've built together, so myself and Sean and his team have put together a survey and a short assessment, really, not a survey, to give you a clear view of where you stand in that. So if you are curious and you'd like to take this, scan the QR code in the slide that I've just popped on the screen. That will take you to a really neat piece of technology called ScoreApp, which we've built it on. It asks you, I think there's 16 questions in total. It should only take you 5, maybe 10 minutes to complete end to end. And at the end, you will get a results page that will give you a score. So we've got 4 different segments based on low, medium, high, and very high in terms of AI readiness based on the score that it gives you. And then the team from ConvergentIS will actually send you, based on the specific answers that you gave, and there are a couple of free text answers in there as well, just to get into the meat on the bone. They will actually give you a personalized email, not an automated AI response, around where some optimization opportunities may lie within your organization and within your processes. So if you want to check that out, scan the QR code, and would be great to get your answers there. Final question, Sean, to you. ConvergentIS originally was built as an SAP integration around P2P and accounts payable automation, and then Rio was something that was launched in the autumn of 2024. I think it was when we met at DPW at the side event. So what other integrations does it have aside from SAP now?
It's already built into quite a few of the other solutions. So if we think about other sourcing, contracting tools, can it do a little bit of that? Sure, but there's folks that'll have, some of those leading solutions, whether that's a Keelvar, Fair Market, or others that have some fantastic solutions that are out there. Obviously, pre-built integrations into quite a few of them, deep integration into Microsoft Office 365. But the part that really continues to set us apart is if you run SAP, as many organizations do, then installing inside SAP is the pedigree that we're coming from. And if your integration is, hey, we need an API or a flat file or an integration system, we don't. We just literally install inside the SAP system. And so that's been our unfair advantage for years. And so if you run your business on SAP, we should talk.
That's a great call to action. Thanks, Sean. Okay, so final call for anyone that has a question, pop it in the chat. I'll leave it open for about another minute if anyone's got a question that you'd like Sean to tackle. If nothing comes in the next 45 seconds, a minute, then I'm going to close it out pretty soon. So last chance saloon for anyone that's got a question. While we're waiting for those to come in, if anyone does have a last minute question, thank you everyone for joining. It's great to get so many of you onto a webinar, and I think Sean's a great guest. I'd love to bring you back actually, Sean, because I think you've got a ton of value to share here, just given your experience on the supply chain side and from internal audit, and then also as a founder in building your own company. So it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. And hopefully we can do this at some point again in the future. We're also going to be doing a bit more content as well. So keep an eye out for that over the coming weeks. We've not got anything firmly lined up, but we've got another couple of things a couple of irons in the fire that should be coming to fruition pretty soon. So there's nothing else that's come in, Sean. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. If anyone wants to reach out to you personally, other than taking the survey, where can they find you?
Pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. Probably the best way to find me, Sean Sievertson. Or just look up Rio. Rio's on LinkedIn too.
Indeed he is. Yeah, he's got his own page, hasn't he?
He does, yeah. Amazing. James, thanks so much, everybody, for taking some time out of your day. Deeply appreciate it. And if you run SAP and need to make intake to pay better, we should talk.